I'm Jasmine Aduse.
And I'm Atticus P. Thank you for joining us here tonight.
We'll begin the 6 o'clock hour now to a local story that has been getting some national attention. Two West Virginia students walked off the field in a shot put contest when a local trans athlete was competing.
Now a lawsuit has been filed in the aftermath. 5's Tanner Gilmartin has been keeping up with the latest developments, and he has the breakdown.
On Thursday, Liberty High School hosted the 2024 Harrison County Middle School Championships track and field competition. During the shot put contest, 5 athletes from Lincoln Middle School stepped out of the circle, forfeiting in protest of another student who was transgender. Just days before their protest, a court found that West Virginia's Save Women's Sports Act, which bars trans athletes from competing in sports with the gender they identify with, not what they were assigned at birth, violates Title IX protections against trans athletes. At the center of all this is a 13-year-old middle school student, Becky Pepper Jackson. She and her mother were the ones who initially appealed the Save Women's Sports Act to the Fourth Circuit, a fight they ultimately won. The Attorney General of West Virginia's office says they plan to appeal the Fourth Circuit's decision all the way to the Supreme Court. As a result of their actions, the student-athletes who protested were suspended from their next track and field meet, leading their parents to sue Harrison County Board of Education. Make sure to stick with 5 News as this story develops. Keeping you connected in Harrison County, Tanner Gilmartin, 5.
All right, guys, so we got to follow up on a story that I have been following very closely out of West Virginia, a story that, quite honestly, in the same country, I should not have to cover. I should not have to talk about biological boys competing against biological girls and biological girls being upset with it, and then biological girls get punished for defending their civil rights, okay? Defending their right to freedom of speech, okay? And that is what happened to these 5 West Virginia middle schoolers who protested a transgender athlete's participation in a track and field competition. They were barred from future meets after protesting because the U.S. Circuit Courts decided to block West Virginia's ban on male athletes competing against female athletes, okay? And the reason why they did it is because this trans athlete, I believe, is starting their transition before puberty, right? So the argument is that, well, this person's essentially lived their whole life as a girl, and because they haven't went through puberty and they're on puberty blockers, therefore you can't ban them, right? You're violating this person's rights, which I disagree with. I personally think that you should not be allowing children to medically transition before the age of 18. So there should be no debate about whether or not, athletes who transition before puberty, whether or not it's fair. We shouldn't even have to debate it because it shouldn't even be allowed, right? But it is allowed. And this is the world that we live in, unfortunately, which means that Republicans have a lot more work to do on this issue. And it results in stories like this, okay? But I am happy to report that this story has, at least for right now, a somewhat of a happy outcome for right now, as the middle school girls have won a lawsuit that they filed with the help of their parents and the Attorney General of West Virginia against the school board that barred these athletes from being able to compete in future competitions because of their opposition to having to unfairly compete against a biological male. Take a look.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jasmine Aduse. Our top story tonight. A judge in Harrison County has ruled that the students who protested playing against a transgender athlete can continue to compete. The ruling came after more than 3 hours of testimony from school officials, a parent, and 2 of the 5 girls who participated in the protest. Judge Thomas Bedell addressed the court to specify this hearing was not addressing the issue of transgender athletes in sports. It was focused on whether there was a violation of due process and if the school prohibited free speech. In the end, Judge Bedell granted the plaintiff's preliminary injunction motion. That means the students will be allowed to compete in their next 2 matches of the season. Attorney General Patrick Morrisey reacting to Bedell's ruling, saying They need not be silent. They have won by having their voices heard. So glad we were able to weigh in on behalf of these courageous young girls and that they are able to play. The protesting Lincoln Middle School students will be competing against the transgender Bridgeport Middle School student one final time this season at the 8th grade spectacular on May 7th at Lincoln High School.
Yeah, so you seen that, you heard that. Now, there's a lot more detail in regards to why these young girls won their case, and this news story didn't really go over that, but I'm going to go over it right here so you guys can understand exactly what the argument that was made here that allowed them to continue to be able to participate in their track and field events, because the defendants argued that, hey, this is not necessarily a free speech issue, that they were simply enforcing an unwritten rule, right? And basically it came down to whether or not the judge really believed that this rule existed and whether or not it is something that can be enforced, considering the fact that it is unwritten. So without further ado, let's read here. Much of the plaintiff's case hinged on whether an unwritten rule could be enforced. According to Lincoln Middle School track coach Don Reistenberg, she adopted the scratch rule 4 years ago, 1 year after taking on coaching the team. According to Ristenberg, if a student opted out of participating in an event voluntarily, they wouldn't be allowed to compete in that same event at the next meet. Importantly, that rule was never written down nor given to the students in writing. Yeah, so basically, this sounds like what I like to call an ass pull, right? This is like, well, I did something that is controversial, right? Because my feelings was hurt. I didn't like the fact that these girls voluntarily did not play. I don't like that they were protesting. Therefore, I'm going to make up some excuse out of my butt to try to make it seem like that it's not a free speech issue and is more so of a rules issue, right? This is what it sounds like to me, okay? Because it just so happens that this rule is unwritten, right? So basically, this coach can just say, well, I told him that this was the rule, right? It was a verbal thing, okay? I told them that. They all knew. Therefore, it has nothing to do with free speech. It has nothing to do with the fact that I don't like that my team is protesting this trans athlete. It has nothing to do with that. Even though we know that most likely the reasons definitely were because of the fact that they were protesting this trans athlete. Instead, Rustenberg testified that she tells the student athletes the scratch rule at the beginning of the season. The two students testifying disputed that claim. A lawyer with the Harrison County Board of Education claimed that the students' free speech rights were not infringed upon by following the scratch rule. Multiple people testified that there were other forms of protesting the issue of transgender athletes in sports throughout the season. Restenberg, LMS principal Lori Scott, and a student all testified that multiple students wore SWS shirts, short for Save Women's Sports, at meets and were not reprimanded. The only reason the BOE's lawyer argued that the students were not allowed to participate in the next meet was because they violated their coach's scratch rule. And again, that could very well be the case. It's hard for me to say for certain that they were punished with 100% certainty simply because of them protesting the trans athlete. Again, they claim that, well, there's been multiple other protests before and we didn't do anything about it. But again, what were the nature of those protests, right? Was it as direct as that protest was? Now, you got to understand the protest that these girls staged at this track meet, the one that got them suspended, this came right after a ruling that allowed the athlete to continue to play, right? So this was something that happened at a very pivotal kind of time when it comes to this debate on whether or not biological males should be allowed to compete against biological females. So you can argue that the circumstances are different. I think it's impossible to say for certain why they were suspended. Was it simply because of the scratch rule, or was it because of retaliation from them protesting? Because, you know, in these other incidences where you may have students that protest or spoke out, again, it didn't become a national news story, okay? And it wasn't after this controversial court decision. So again, the stakes were a lot higher, I believe, okay, after this last protest. And I think that that probably is what went into these athletes being barred from being able to participate in future competitions. But me personally, I think that having this unwritten rule where the coach can just decide how they want to enforce the rule based off their feelings, I think is kind of weird to me, because what happens if somebody has to voluntarily pull out or forfeit for, some emergency, right? I mean, I'm just saying, like, how is this rule enforced, right? Is there any excuse for why an athlete should be able to pull out, or are there no excuses at all, right? No matter what, an athlete can't voluntarily pull out a competition unless they want to forfeit their ability to participate in future competitions, right? Like, how does that work? This is why it needs to be written down, right? You can't enforce a rule that's not written down, right? That a coach can just, arbitrarily decide how she wants to enforce. Again, there's no written language that is a guideline for, okay, this is how we enforce this policy, right? So I think that's honestly what it came down to, is the fact that this rule was not written. In the end, Judge Bedell said that both sides made good points, but was going to grant the plaintiffs a preliminary injunction motion. That means the students will be allowed to compete in their next and final 2 matches of the season, regardless of whether they protest by violating Coach Reisenberg's scratch rule. I think that's the right judgment, 100%, because it's too arbitrary, right? And it's not written down. So again, it's just based off the coach's, arbitrary, interpretation of a rule that she keeps in her head, right? I don't think that's fair. All parties agreed that should the scratch rule want to be enforced in the future, it would need to be in writing. Reisenberg and Scott committed to making that happen for the next season. Yeah, so again, what you can see here is that there's a lot of work to be done by Republicans in some of these states. Now, a lot of that work is going to be hard to get it done because of the Biden administration and what they're doing with Title IX. And this is why stories like this are so important, extremely important, because it shows you what's at stake in the next election, okay? We're not just talking about the economy or the border or crime, okay, or, potential World War III, right, which could happen. We're also talking about civil rights, okay, the rights of women to be able to have their own spaces in sports, in schools. That's what's on the line here, guys. And see, here's the thing. I think this is an argument that Republicans have to start making, that, hey, if you believe in civil rights for women, right, if you're on the side of women's rights, then you need to stand with the Republican Party, or the right side of the aisle. You need to stand against Joe Biden, because those are the same arguments that Democrats make. And let's be honest, those arguments are very persuasive, okay? But here we have the Biden administration taking a sledgehammer to the cornerstone of women's rights in sports, Title IX, women's rights in education. And yet these are the people that are trying to position themselves as, oh, well, we're on the side of women, right? When no, you're against women. You do not even believe in the most basic of women's rights, which is for women to have their own spaces and to compete amongst themselves in sports. And that's an argument that has to be made. And we have to start reframing these issues, right? Issues that, Democrats have historically done well on, and remind people that, hey, when it comes to civil rights in this country, the Republican Party has spearheaded this, okay? Whether that be the women's right to vote, whether that be the Civil Rights Act, all these things have been supported and spearheaded by the Republican Party. But yet it seems to be that Democrats have hijacked this, and they've essentially tried to make it seem like they're the ones that are on the side of women's rights. Now, again, that doesn't mean we're on the side of modern day radical feminism, okay, which I would argue has led to where we are right now, where, women think that they can be men and men think that they can be women. Okay. I mean, quite literally, I think that is a result of feminism, but, I'm just saying that, we have to reframe the issue in regards to who's on the side of civil rights. Just like when it comes to the race issue, well, who's really against racism? Okay, I think conservatives can say for certain that we're against racism, all forms of racism, more so than the left. The left openly endorses racism, specifically against white. So with that being said, when it comes to this story right here, congratulations to these girls for this W in court. This is how you stand up. This is how you push back. This is how you refuse to bend the knee to the mob. And congratulations to them, okay? And there's still more work to be done, right? But again, you take the W's when you can get them, okay? Because, in 2024, they seem to be pretty rare. So when you get them, you celebrate them, and you just keep moving forward. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.